In this episode of the podcast, I got to the things that get me excited is talking about the 80s and the 90s, because it's my era. It's my era, and I loved the films. And today I spoke with Susan, who is a Patrick Swayze fan and a member of the fan club, and has written books about him. And we chatted all things Patrick Swayze. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. Thank you very much for joining me for something that, when I saw you on the list of people that I could possibly interview, I was genuinely curious to how you become. You're like I don't know. Is Patrick Swayze is the person who, if you were of the right age, will understand that he was just phenomenal. How did it start for you?
Well, that's a great question. It started way back in 1987, when the movie Dirty Dancing came out.
Yeah.
And I was an avid movie. No, for real.
Yeah. No, I genuinely believe you. It's people today will never understand 70s and 80s movie stars. You just, if you were not there, you'll never understand like how big and important something like Dirty Dancing was to the culture of Europe, America, and Great Britain.
Yes, it was totally amazing. I mean, I was a avid moviegoer anyway, and so I'm like, okay, let's go see this movie. And I'm pretty sure it was the first weekend that it was playing around here, and I went. I was just like blown away. So I was one of those who went back, to the movie theater, see it again. And, I noticed the audience would be saying the lines ahead of time, and they would just be so involved with the movie,
I do.
And then, I was going to say, and then what happened was Barbara Walters did an interview with Patrick in 1988, I want to say. And it was out at his ranch, near LA. And after that is when I really became a big fan. Because, it was obvious Patrick was so talented from the movie. But Barbara Walters, I think he was very genuine, down to earth. You could tell he had integrity, character. And he was talking about his dad, who unfortunately had passed away suddenly, and how he wanted to honor his dad by having a ranch with horses. His dad had been into that, even though he was an engineer, but there was a long family background of ranching and stuff. And, he broke down crying, and, he talked about how he wants his work to touch people. So after that, I was just a goner. Not only was he so talented, obviously good looking, but, he seemed to be somebody of character. So eventually I got involved with his international official fan club. Well, actually, the lady who was running it lives in Scotland, she and her husband. And I know it sounds kind of crazy joining a fan club. I'm like, okay, what are you, a fangirl now? An adult, And I never did that for anyone else but for him. But it was a really great experience. I still have friends today from the club. They're all over the world, and that's how I started to become a writer, because the president out there in Scotland asked me, like, you're going to this event with Patrick, he's coming to Detroit. Will you write an article on it so the other people can live vicariously through you? I said, sure. And then I ended up writing like 13 articles. I met Patrick like 4 times. I met some of his family. So it was really, really a great experience.
I want to just go to something before. I'm obviously going to ask you what it was like meeting him. But one of the things is, because it's really difficult. I have a niece who's 13. And it's really, she wouldn't be interested anyway if I tried to explain it to her. But fan clubs were a massive thing. The world before the internet was a different world. Nobody, people will never understand just how the internet changed the world in so many ways. And fan clubs was a perfectly normal, reasonable thing to do. You would buy them. You'd buy, if like if I knew you as a person and knew that you were into Patrick Swayze, it wouldn't be unreasonable for me, for your birthday or for Christmas or something, to buy you a membership to his fan club, because that's how you'd get all the inside juice on the guy, and know where he was going and what he was doing. And fan clubs were an integral part of our growing up and our culture. So I mean, I completely understand, joining a fan club and getting...
I was very selective who I told that I was, in a fan club.
Yeah.
But it really, and for me, I didn't find this club until around 2000. And I was just getting on the internet. And there was a small fee, I think, because of the magazine. It was mailed out. It was a paper magazine. It wasn't online, and it was mailed out. It had photos, and
I do miss those things, because there used to be this thing about with magazines, whether it was a weekly, fortnightly, monthly, quarterly, or whatever. You look forward to when you've seen it come through the letterbox, and
absolutely,
and you'd read it over and over for days on end, and so much pleasure came from
absolutely
any sort of magazine. It was just amazing. So it's interesting, because you said it was Dirty Dancing that brought him to your attention. So I was slightly ahead of you, because I was a big Outsiders fan when I was a kid, from the S.E. Hinton book, The Outsiders, and he obviously played, he played the big brother, and
yes, he was terrific in that role.
He was amazing, and not only was he genuinely, especially in his youth then, great looking guy, but he looked like a big brother should look like, and he looked like he was an athlete. He had that character. Everything about that character was exactly like the book. It was just like he matched him perfectly. And
that was such a classic movie,
Yeah, it was. And then there was like I've written a list of the things that stand out for me when I think of Patrick Swayze. And then there was Red Dawn, Youngblood, which was these are films that people won't know, but if you were a teenager in the 80s and the 90s, then obviously
Patrick Swayze fans will know them, though.
I mean, Dirty Dancing was the one that I think arguably made him a global star.
It blew the lid off the water, is what he said.
Him and Demi Moore and Whoopi Goldberg. So that was Ghost. Sorry, Dirty Dancing. Jennifer Grey. But Dirty.
Yeah, but he had also. Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, because Dirty Dancing always reminded me of Top Gun, in the sense that it changed culture. When Top Gun came out in 1986, the way it actually made a dent in the way that we communicated, approached life, and aspired to be something or do something. And the reason Dirty Dancing was so clever with Patrick Swayze, because he was the first person that I remember from my generation that made dancing cool. You could be the cool hard guy, which he was in that film, and be a dancer, and that was fine. Do you know what I mean?
It was wonderful.
Because he was both the good guy and the bad guy.
Yeah. It was really his first dance movie. He had sort of avoided being involved in anything with dancing because he wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, And he was advised not to do the movie.
Yeah. And but it was something about his masculinity that pulls everything off every time. Because he obviously later went on, and like with Ghost, he plays that soft character again. But then he played, like, after Dirty Dancing, it was Steel Dawn and then Roadhouse. you know, which has just been
yeah.
re-released. But in Roadhouse, he's the absolute hard man. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's like, hang on, a couple of films ago, you were dancing. You know, and again, like the famous line, and this is what I mean about things that change culture, when the famous line, nobody puts baby in the corner. Okay, and the famous ending where, you know, they're practicing the dance in the lake for the which becomes the famous ending, and all of that is to go to play that film, and then this is where I refer to him. This is why I say he was phenomenal. To play that film, and then a couple of films later, do Roadhouse, which was the complete opposite. It's just like there are so few actors that could pull that off. And then he did Next of Kin, and then he did Ghost, and the complete opposite of a character. There's this soft, gentle, and sometimes it's really hard to understand how good an actor he was, because he could play the hard man and the soft man. He looked good in both roles.
Yes. And
he could do one film 1 second, you know, 1 year, and then the next year complete opposite. And very few characters can do that. And then obviously after Ghost was Point Break, which is just
that was great.
Yeah, exactly. Where he kind of plays the good guy, bad guy. And but again, he I mean, Point Break was just, again, a film that changed culture. To do it in, and it's just like, and then obviously the cult classic was Donnie Darko. You know, I mean, Point Break arguably could be said was a cult classic, but I think it was bigger than a cult. But it's I can't think, apart of the exceptions to the rule, like say a Mel Gibson, Tom Cruise, there are not many that were able to play such different characters and make them believable. And Patrick Swayze was one of them.
I totally agree. He never wanted to be like typecast. He always wanted to challenge himself, you know. And he had a movie, Keeping Mum, later on.
Yep.
It was actually filmed in the UK. And he played some, if I remember correctly, a golf instructor.
Yeah.
Do you know this story? And
I do know the film a little bit. The ones that I kind of talked about were the ones that, in a way, and then this is like going back to like fan clubs and stuff, is those are all characters that people of my age would love to have been that guy. Do you know what I mean? Patrick Swayze, like Tom Cruise, played characters that you wanted to be that person in real life. You know, and I think that's, to be able to transcend the screen, where people can do. There was something about some of the characters, you know, like I was saying in The Outsiders, when Patrick Swayze played the big brother, you could see who that guy was in real life. Do you know what I mean? The way that he fitted the character that S.E. Hinton wrote about. Not just physically, but just his mannerisms and everything like that. There were people out there who would be able to say, yeah, my brother was like that. That was what my big brother was like. Or you wanted to be like that. And he played so many characters that you would want to be that guy in real life. And being able to do that as a film star. And, you know, like I said, you go from dancing to a Roadhouse bouncer, then, you know, Next of Kin, where you're like a copper who's on a revenge mission, and then Ghost, where you literally play a ghost with this who's heartbroken, trying to protect his lover. And then Point Break is, if there was a scale of opposite characters, it's either end of that scale. It's phenomenal. And like I said, it just the way that he was able to navigate that and pull it off, it was just amazing. And quite a few of those films, like, you know, Dirty Dancing, Roadhouse, Ghost, and Point Break, did something that very few people other than, say, Tom Cruise did, where they were films that affected the culture of the time, especially with teenagers and young adults.
I totally agree. And I wonder, with all these remakes and sequels and all that, what's going to happen? I mean, you know, as a younger generation who didn't ever see any of the original films, are they going to go back and watch them?
I don't know.
They're definitely going to, I think, watch the ones that are coming out now, like you mentioned, the new Roadhouse. And there's a Dirty Dancing sequel, supposedly for the summer of 2025. You know, what's going to happen? Patrick never really wanted to do remakes or sequels or anything like that. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, because I don't know, because I genuinely, I don't think I've been able to adapt to how young people think in that sense, because but like I said, it's different because we might wait 4 months for a fan magazine to turn up. Do you know what I mean? They don't need to they don't need to do that. They can just go on the internet and see something instantly. So you know, like I remember that there was a period where with Dirty Dancing, my sister would watch part of it every morning while we were getting ready to go to school. So it would just be permanently in the VHS, and she would just play it. And then when she had to stop, or we had to go and get the bus or whatever, she'd just stop it, and the next morning she'd pick up from where she left off. And by the end of the week, she'd watch the whole film again. And that's
fabulous.
Yeah, and that was my little sister, because she was so crazy.
How old do you think she was when she was doing that?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think, because she's 2 years younger than me. So it's whenever it came out on VHS, really. Because that's when it started.
Yeah. I don't think she was the only one doing that.
Well, listen, everybody did it. You know, if you were like obsessed with something, that's what you did. You'd watch the same film over and over and over and over and over and over again. And
you know, it's sort of like a shot of feel good. You know, it has so many, the romance, and people accept you for who you are. You know. And the coming of age story, it has, in the music and the dancing, it just has so much in it. It's like magic in a bottle, you know.
It was, and this is, you know, I'm starting to sound like a stuck record, but this is why, like I said, I lament the internet a little bit, because some of those films we talked about. Look, here's the thing: is 40 years later, whatever it is, you and I are talking from across an ocean about how some of the films that he made just etched themselves in our memories, and my niece will never understand that. It's never going to happen to her.
Yeah.
Right,
but I think Patrick would be so happy to know this. You know, he really wanted to make a difference. And I think he has. He wanted to leave a legacy, you know.
Yeah, so you said you met him 4 times. How much time were you able to spend much time with him in those moments?
Well, one of the times, which was the second time I met him, it was in Houston. And it was a premiere of he and his wife Lisa's movie One Last Dance. That was a dance movie, for real dancing. And the club organized a lot of stuff for the fans to do. And that was a time, it wasn't necessarily just me and Patrick, you know what I mean? I was a fan in the club and writing for the magazine, but they had the premiere of the movie. We were seated right in front of his family. Had a movie going in 4 different theaters at the same time. And Patrick and Lisa, they introduced the movie. Then they had a reception across the way. There was like 1,000 people. They were usually running around talking to people individually. They took group photos with us. But then the next day, surprise, we were on a tour bus. When I say we, fans, this might sound sort of whatever, but we were going to take a tour, like where he grew up, where his mom's dance studio had been, where he got married, stuff like that. So mom comes on the tour bus, right? She goes, Patrick's going to come on here. But he only asked, please don't take any more photos. His eyes are really sensitive from the night before. And we were just like, we couldn't believe it. It was a really big surprise. And I was sitting like in third row. So he comes on the bus. So he and his mom are on the bus. They go, ask us anything you want. And I'm like, whoa. So they stayed on the bus for like an hour.
Oh, wow.
Which, I mean, how many of the people on his tour would do that? It was in 2003, I want to say, way after Dirty Dancing and Point Break and Roadhouse and all that stuff. And they were just so down to earth, So that was a time that I spent the most time with him, because we had the group photos, we had the individual little chat, and then we had the thing on the bus. And so it was, and their movie had the theme of, it's never too late to realize your dreams, okay? And it was just, I came home from that weekend, and that's when I decided to write a book. And that was my first book after that. And because it was just so inspiring,
Mm.
So it was really great. And he was the first time I met him, I can admit, like a couple of days ahead of time, I hardly slept or ate, because I'm like, this is crazy. He was hosting a benefit for contemporary ballet company called Complexions. And it was in Detroit, only about, like half hour from where I live. Then my aunt and I went, and there was, he introduced the company. He didn't dance, but then after, there was a benefit across the street at a club, and he gave photos and autographs, and my aunt had a little incident. She wasn't feeling good, and Patrick was such a gentleman. You could see those Southern manners come across, and so nice and so cool. And, it was just, excuse me, I'm so sorry. We got allergies going today. So he was just, it was really a great memory. Now, I calmed down after the initial meeting. I never got like that again before. It's gonna, I'll meet up with him again. So you could see he was just a down to earth guy. His mom, I mean, that's where he got it from, his parents.
What was his upbringing?
His upbringing?
Yeah.
Well, he was born and grew up in Houston, but his mom started taking him to her dance studio because she was a renowned teacher and choreographer. And he probably was a baby, and he would say he grew up in the theater seats, and he probably started dancing around age 3. And his dad was an engineer, but he also, I guess they were sort of ahead of the times, because mom would be working, more in the afternoon and evenings, and dad would take over what mom would usually do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he had, several siblings, and he was just, really funny when he got The Sexiest Man Alive. I think that was around 91. His mom was quoted in People. She goes, you know what? He doesn't understand or doesn't think he deserves all this idol treatment. He's just a down-to-earth kid from Texas, But he also had the aspect of, being a dancer, taking dancing from his mom. He would get bullied and beat up. One time he ended up in the hospital. So there was that aspect of it too. And he talked about how he tried to, maybe just forget about the arts and he used to play the violin as well, and just try to fit in with the kids. And then it didn't work. They still bullied him. So he said, you know what? He was only 13. He goes, I'm not going to change who I am for anybody, So he had that aspect to deal with, because down in Houston, in the 50s and early 60s that, men don't dance. So, but he was also very athletic. He was in all the sports. And if he hadn't had his knee injury when he was a high school senior, he might have gone into football.
I remember reading somewhere that he was quite a good American football player.
Yeah, and he did all kinds of sports. I mean, he went to college in Texas on a gymnastics scholarship initially. Then he ended up in Disneyland Parade. Then he ended up in New York. I forget which dance company. He was involved with 2 different ones, and then the knee thing got to be really bad. And at one point they thought they'd have to amputate his leg. Can you imagine that, being a dancer? And eventually, though, he decided, his knee just was not gonna work with his knee being like that. And then that's when he went into the acting.
Okay.
And yeah, so his mom was the type of teacher for all of her students, because I did a book on his mom too. And I talked to a lot of her previous students. She would teach not just the dance, but she would teach like the acting and the singing along with the dancing. So he had more like a musical, what do you call it? Like background, rather. Okay. Like a, stage musical background rather than movies or TV. But I think that all paid off. I mean, he was an intense guy, and I think he got a lot of that from his mom. His mom was, she ended up choreographing movies like Urban Cowboy, if you ever saw that one, Hope Floats. And she ended up moving out to LA eventually after all that, and she had a studio there in Simi Valley for a while. And so, it was sort of a two-edged sword, though, because she was probably like him, like a perfectionist, you know what I mean, and very demanding with him. So that sort of worked for him and sort of against him. His dad was more low-key, but his dad died suddenly at age 57, a heart attack out walking the dogs, and that was just crushing to the whole family. Patrick, he became the man of the house after that. That's when he, started some drinking. But, nobody has a perfect childhood, right?
No.
Perfect. So, but he would talk about all these things a lot. So I love watching his interviews, because you would never know what he would say. And he was pretty honest. Some people, probably his people on his team, didn't really like that, because he would just come out with. But because
it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting that he could have had, potentially he could have had a successful football career, but he injured his knee. He was having a successful dance career, but the knee injury curtailed that, and he ended up becoming a successful actor. Now, there's almost 2 lots of bad luck, which ended up being the best thing that happened to him.
Yeah, he talked about acting was something that you can never complete. You're always growing and learning, and he always wanted to challenge himself. And he loved learning different things he had to learn for different movies. You know what I mean? Like you mentioned Point Break, like the skydiving.
Yeah.
And that's him coming out of the plane. That's no stunt guy or anything. I've talked with, because of my books and that, I've talked with some of the stunt cameramen from that movie. And I also interviewed 2 of the bank robbers that were in the movie. I've got a new book I'm working on, and that was him, and that was unheard of. Now Tom Cruise started doing that kind of thing too recently, but and then the surfing, there was a stunt double for some of that, but he cracked his ribs surfing, I believe, and he thought that was more dangerous than the skydiving.
Well, I surf, and I can tell you it can get quite tricky because they were surfing some big waves as well, and the type of surfing he was doing, it's not simple stuff. You know, I think he must have been a fairly experienced surfer, or if not, he had taken lots of tuition, because you just wouldn't be able to do what he did in the film if you didn't do it. I mean, it was some pretty top level surfing. Not just anybody can surf big waves, and that's the thing, is he really was a phenomenally talented guy. He genuinely was. So how many books have you written now?
I've written 4, and the first 2 were on the movie Dirty Dancing. Of course, there's a lot about Patrick in both those books, right? And then the 3rd one was on his mom, Patsy. Because like you said, she touched so many people's lives. She was such a teacher. And then I skipped a book. The 3rd book, I'm sorry, was Patrick Swayze, The Dreamer. And it was sort of a biography with theme of he was a dreamer. You know what I mean? Like he's always setting new goals and all that kind of stuff. And I had a few celebrity tributes in that book too, but most of it was focused on his career and the people who worked with him, and you know how they talked about how he was sort of behind the times but sort of ahead of the times, you know. And he was, you know, North and South, that was another great work of his. Yeah. Although, you know, that was before Dirty Dancing too, but I to be honest, I didn't really get into it. But I've talked to people who were in that with Patrick, and because I work on a 5th book now, which is all going to be memories and tributes and stories about Patrick, by people who worked with him, grew up with him, stuff like that. Anyways, the North and South, he was so great in that role, and he would talk about how the values of those times, he felt more comfortable with that and being in those times than in modern contemporary times, you know. And of course, he got to do the horse riding. He loved horses. You know, he was an advocate for Arabian horses. I talked with somebody about that too, who has an organization here. And so anyway, I've done 4 books, and this 5th one I'm working on, and it's just written now. I just got to figure out how exactly I'm going to publish and stuff like that. So,
yes,
it's been quite a journey.
I've always wondered, like, with someone like Patrick Swayze, who, how do you, how can I put this? Because this is the thing, when you don't understand something, it's difficult to ask the question. But when you were such a cultural icon, how much awareness would he have had about that? Because he's just himself. He's just like, this is what I do. I'm Patrick Swayze. Right. I turn up for cameras. I film something. And when I'm not doing that, I'm probably at home at the ranch. And occasionally I have to do interviews. And I'd imagine there's, for anyone like these people, there's an on-off switch. They turn it on for this and then go home, and that's when he's actually Patrick Swayze. But I wonder, because they must be in a little bit of a bubble as well, just how much awareness they can have of their place in modern culture.
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, I think near the end is when he was really evaluating all of that. I mean, he was always somebody who was more than just surface. He's always looking for meaning and things like that. But near the end, you know, when you know you're probably going to die, you really reevaluate things. And I've had 2 people tell me, one's a film director and one was a bodyguard, that he knew how much people appreciated his work. And he was always very grateful about the fans and very nice to his fans. And he talked about wanting to leave a legacy. And by the way, there were some interviews where he talks and his wife talks about how when he was playing certain characters, in the middle of the movie, he would come home and he's still that character. So, which would be a double-edged sword, right? So, and he always, I sort of digress a little bit. He talks about like early on becoming famous and that it was just so overwhelming. He tried to look at other people who had been famous and how they handled it. He didn't want to be like certain people who, I don't know, overdosing or whatever, and how he wanted, just to stay basic. That's why he liked being on his ranches, and in between the movies and stuff, and you know what? He had one of the producers of Dirty Dancing, Linda Gottlieb, said, you know what? He would be on set, he'd be calling home to the ranch to see how all the animals were doing. Yeah. And he probably would have preferred being on the ranch. Not that he didn't like acting, he loved acting, okay? But when he was due to be coming to Detroit the first time, the fan club president said, that is so not like him. Like, he's going to do photographs and autographs and, like, mingle with people. And he did all that, So, I think he always had sort of, when I talked about his mom before, he always had a little bit of self-doubt too at times, very critical of himself and stuff. But I think everybody.
But it's interesting for somebody that talented, who was talented across many skills, because there was the acting, the dancing, obviously the athleticism. He could sing. I can't. I'm pretty sure. Was it the theme tune to? Was it Dirty Dancing that he's?
She's Like the Wind.
Yeah, was that Dirty Dancing?
Yeah, he didn't write it for Dirty Dancing. He had a co-writer with him, Stacey Wildlitz, but I think it was supposed to be for Grandview USA, but they didn't take it in there. Obviously, good thing too, right?
Yeah, but because he sung it though, didn't he? He sung it.
Yes, he did. So talented.
Yeah, that's what I mean, because that again, it was a global hit.
Oh yeah, there's people talk about how. Well, first of all, he has songs in other movies too that he sings. Some of them he wrote. In Roadhouse, he's got a couple, and The One Last Dance, we've got a couple. Fox and Hounds, there's one where he sings. But people talk about how, music was another passion. He did so many songs that never saw the light of day. They were just for him. He was sort of waiting to, maybe produce a record or something. But there's a lot of stuff he wrote that the public doesn't know about or ever heard.
When was
amazing.
When was the last time you saw him?
I'm sorry.
When was the last time you saw him? Can you hear me now?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that was. Oh, yeah. Okay, I forget. Right. The last time was 2004. He was back in Detroit a second time. And it was the same thing. He was hosting a benefit for Complexions, Contemporary Ballet. And it was the same kind of scenario. He didn't dance, but he hosted the benefit across the street at the club. And, the time before that was in 2003. I was in Nashville with a couple other fans. They had another screening of the movie One Last Dance, and we got the red carpet treatment. We he had done a question and no, I'm serious. He had done a question and answer with his wife and with the guy who wrote that song with. She's like the when he wrote the music for One Last Dance, did a Q&A. And afterwards, I had a lady who had never met him. She was my co-fan, right? I had to push her. She was a little tongue-tied. You know, he's giving autographs. The bodyguard's going, hurry up, Patrick. We got to go now. We got to go. He goes, no, no, no. I finished giving the autographs and all that. But that evening, he and his team, entourage, whatever you want to call it, were having dinner in the basement of a jazz club in Nashville. And so we show up, and his personal assistant's there, and she knew we were going to be there. It was just three of us ladies. And so she comes over to us and this and that. She goes, do you want to talk to Patrick? And all these other people are like watching this, right? These other people at the bar and stuff, having food. And so she goes, can you just give him a chance to, like, you know, finish his dinner and this and that? And we go, of course we can, you know. So a little while she comes and gets us. She takes us over to him and his wife, and I got a one-on-one conversation with him. So the other two ladies, and then we're going to leave because, you know, you don't want to overextend your little experience. And all these people are just staring at us like, who are they? And so what does he do? Come on, let's take photos. So we have photos of us and he and his wife. I mean, it was just, oh, and then we're leaving, and then he reaches over and he gives me a big hug. And I'm like, wow, you know, he didn't have to do all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, because this is what I mean, is I think that's partly where I'm coming from when you're someone like Patrick Swayze and you're in those shoes where you have people who are a member of a fan club, and, you know, the guy still has to look in the mirror and sort of think, you know, what the hell is going on? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, you know, these people are traveling from all around the world to come and see me. And to find yourself in a position where people do want to talk to you and they want to know about your life, your motivations, your interests. And at the same time, there must have been a point, like a transition, where he wonders, as he's becoming more famous, where he wonders, ooh, I wonder if they want to have a photograph. Do they want my autograph? And then there comes a point where he's the one that says, shall we do photographs? Because he knows that's what they want. Do you know what I mean? And you have to that has to become a transition where his life is, if I'm doing this, they're going to want to talk to me. They're going to want autographs. They're going to want hugs. They're going to want photos. But to always be able to switch that on. And from what you say, my understanding would be he seemed to appreciate the time and energy people gave him, and seemed to be in a place of appreciation of, actually, I feel lucky that I'm able to do this. Like you said, he was always passionate about his work impacting people. So
absolutely,
you know, so to know the expectation and then to actually be happy with it.
I mean, I had heard a cute story, like when I think it was right after Dirty Dancing, like, you know, fans were crazy. I mean, it's one thing to be respectful, you know, a fan be respectful, another like to mob his car or something like that, which is horrible. But it was kind of like this lady who worked in a publicity firm in the LA area. She told me this story, like, it was, I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do here? Like, they want my autograph. They want me to do a perfume. They want, you know, posters. They want this and that. And this is like out of control. So yeah, it was a learning process. I don't think he did set out to be a movie star, but I don't know if he ever knew that it would come to how great a big a movie star he was, you know.
Because you can imagine over the years the crazy stories fans have told him, and he just has to sort of sit there and be like, yeah, well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, when I talked to him in Houston, I just told him, well, I was at the Complexions benefit. I saw you, and he goes, well, you didn't see me dance, but now in this movie, you can see me dance. And, started talking about a soundtrack, how excited he was. It's going to be an album. And we just,
Yeah.
because we have a video of that thing in Houston. I still have it here. It's just a crazy memory, crazy that I can't watch some of his stuff sometimes. Even though he passed away like 14 years ago, I just can't. It depends. Sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. But something like that, the video that's totally personal. It was the reception after the premiere of that movie, and he's literally running around talking to all the fans, and he's being interviewed on TV, and he's talking to a lady with cerebral palsy or something like that, and he's just mixing with 1,000 people. Initially with no bodyguard, stuff like that. And so it's very I really think though he's left a great legacy of all the works you talked about and just the battles he went through in his life, and especially with the pancreatic cancer,
Do you remember where and when you heard he had cancer?
Yeah, I mean, I was, my dad and my stepmom were visiting from California, and I live in Michigan. And so my stepmom goes something like, I saw in the National Enquirer, Patrick has cancer. I go, what? And my grandmother had died from pancreatic cancer, my father's mother, so I knew that is not a good thing to have, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a battle. And, the club, his wife put out a statement through the fan club. By then, they're doing news flashes and stuff on the computer, emails and stuff. And it was just, I'm like, well, I wonder if the story is true, And, well, there's got to be a little bit of truth in it. Yeah, unfortunately, it was true. And of course, I remember, when he passed, I had a friend from work, the coworker had sent me a text, and I'm like, what? And I called in sick to work, and my boss said, oh, that's fine. And then I was asked to do an interview for a Toronto newspaper. I said, okay. I was sitting there crying and everything. And it was just, he had a guest book through the fan club, on the website. And prior to that, the president just monitored it too. But once it got diagnosed, I mean, at one point the thing crashed because there were so many people on it. So we had like 3 or 4 of us monitoring it. Mostly it was all good stuff. But once in a while he had some weird comment or something. Everybody wanted to tell him how to get treatment, what to do, and this and that. And, so, and you remember that Barbara Walters interviewed him again, right? Mm-hmm. After he got his diagnosis, which was only around 6 or 7 months before he died or something like that. Maybe more like 8 or 9 months.
So where were you when he died?
Where was I when I got that text? I think I was at home because it was in the evening. And of course, I got an email from the club president, a personal email, because his wife had let her know, that unfortunately. And then, they had a memorial service that was sort of secret. But it was organized by his wife, and Whoopi Goldberg supposedly was a commentator. And they had all kinds of performances and all kinds of people who worked with him and this and that. And actually, our club president and husband went, from Scotland, but it was all hush hush until it was over. I have certain people tell me certain things about it, but it's still, people who were there, it was very private, but it sounds like it was a very nice tribute to him.
Just just to sort of finish up, if you know, we were talking earlier about you know, what it was like in the 80s, and a question I like to ask people is, if you could go back to any time, anywhere in history or anywhere forward, you know, and any time ever, where would you go? What car would you drive? And what music would you be listening to? So we're going to adapt that for you, in honor of Patrick Swayze. So, what drive-through would you go to? Right. What car would you be?
I'm sorry.
What drive-through would you? What car would you be in, and what film would you go and watch?
Oh, I'm going to watch Dirty Dancing, and I'd have a car where you could put the top down, you know.
Yeah, nice convertible.
And you could blast your music, right?
Yeah.
Whatever car that may be. And now I'd be seeing Dirty Dancing.
And
blasting.
Do you have a favorite driving?
Do I have favorites? What?
Driving?
Driving?
Yeah, drive-through driving, you know. Do you have a favorite one near?
Not really.
No? No, that's good.
Are you talking about a movie drive-in?
Yeah.
Oh, they don't have them around here anymore, hardly.
Oh.
It's a thing of the past. I remember going, though, when I was much younger, a couple of times, and that was cool. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Once in a while, they have a special event. I mean, even I've heard of Dirty Dancing being shown at an event like that, especially when COVID came, you know what I mean? People were going in theaters, and so they did have it outside. But I did go once to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where I went undergrad, but they had a special thing in the summer. They were showing Dirty Dancing, you know, at night outside, and the lawns were just packed with students and people of all ages, just, you know, watching this movie. And it was incredible, because these were young college students. I mean, I'm talking maybe 15 years ago or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was really cool to see the different generations.
Have you been to any of the film sets or the film locations?
I was just going to say, the film festivals, right? So Lake Lure in North Carolina, which was the second primary film location for Dirty Dancing, they invited me to be a guest speaker at the festival in 2018. And I went, and they show the movie Dirty Dancing in the evening, too, outdoors. It's so cool. And so I gave my speech right before the movie and all that. There was like 3,000 people. I'm like, 3,000 people I'm going to talk to? But there were 3,000 people. And then, trying to think, the next day I got to like do a book signing. There were a bunch of vendors and craftspeople and stuff like that, and all kinds of dancing going on. It was just like a big festival outdoors, and I got to do a cool book signing on 3 of my books. And they even had contests in the water to do the lift, who's going to win. And it was just really cool. And they still have that once a year, but they moved it, I think, to September, where it's a little cooler. And then I did go to Virginia, to Mountain Lake Lodge. When I was working on my first book, I wanted to interview the guy who was the manager. He had been there while they were filming the Dirty Dancing, you know, and I wanted to interview him for my book. He goes, "You got to come here. You got to come here." I go, "But it's the winter." He goes, "That's fine." So like I went there, it was like early January, it was like 10 below or something. It was very unusually cold, but it was so cool seeing all the sights. And he had a bunch of archives from the movie and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And they have Dirty Dancing weekends. They have about 6 a year. And then they, of course, show the movie. Also have dance contests. They have a gift shop there. And they're selling like 3 of my books there. I'm so grateful for
that's
that.
Nice. That's good.
A bunch of other stuff like T-shirts and that you can order online for anyone who wants to. You know, hats and T-shirts and hoodies and, you know, coffee mugs. And it's just it was so cool going to the film location, even though it was in the winter, you know.
Yeah.
It was just really iconic.
And that's a wonderful place to stop. Thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed reliving some of my teenage years. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Well, there you go. That was me and Susan talking about Patrick Swayze, the great films, the great man himself. Maybe you have your own experience of him. Maybe you remember the films. Maybe you're like my niece and you'll have never heard of anything that I've spoken about. But I do hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you very much for listening, for watching, for tuning in. And wherever you are, whatever you do, wherever you are from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed.